Hello, everyone. If you're just joining this meeting, we are going to wait about 2 or 3 minutes to give everyone an opportunity to join. And in the meantime, while we're waiting, just know that we will begin at around 6:03 or 6:05 while we wait for people to join this session. Okay, it looks like I haven't seen anybody else join the meeting. We'll give it another minute. If nobody else is joining, we'll just go ahead and get started. Okay, I don't see anybody else joining this meeting. For those of you who are attending this meeting, welcome. Thank you for joining. Prior to beginning this meeting, I would like to read out a session statement that will basically highlight outline the meeting rules and recording notice and all of that. So prior to beginning our presentation, we want to address a few key points to ensure a smooth and productive session. This meeting will be recorded for transparency and accessibility for those unable to attend this meeting. By participating, you consent to being recorded. This meeting recording will be posted on our website, and I will send you all an email once that recording is available. Santa Cruz County respects citizens' free speech rights and has developed public meeting conduct standards to respect all meeting participants. Under the conduct standards, meeting organizers can remove disruptive individuals online who engage in behavior that is slanderous, profane, threatening, and who exhibit other disorderly conduct that disrupts the meeting. To streamline the Q&A session, we plan to address all questions at the end of the presentation. We will address questions in the order they are received. Please use the hand-raising feature or the Q&A chat function when seeking recognition to speak at the end of the presentation. All questions and comments will be limited to a maximum of 3 minutes. To help us facilitate a smoother flow of communication throughout the meeting and ensure that everyone has the opportunity to speak. In the unlikely event of a power outage, we will stop the meeting for 10 minutes to wait for power restoration. For those joining us virtually, if you find yourself disconnected, please attempt to reconnect. If you're unable to reconnect successfully, attempt to reconnect in 10 minutes. If the power outage persists beyond 10 minutes, we will have to reschedule the current meeting, and we will communicate a new meeting date and time via email. We appreciate your cooperation and look forward to a productive meeting. Now I will transition this meeting to Allison, who is from District 2 Supervisor Zach Friend's office.
Thank you, Tiffany, and welcome everyone to tonight's meeting. As Tiffany said, my name is Allison Violante. I am Chief of Staff to Supervisor Friend's office. He unfortunately couldn't be here this evening. He is up in Sacramento chairing the California State Association of Counties Health and Human Services Commission this week. We're just here this evening to participate and be available for any questions that are outside the scope of this meeting. And we appreciate everyone being here this evening. And then my colleague, Forrest Revere, is here this evening, and I'll let him introduce himself as well.
Thank you, Allison, and good afternoon, everyone. As mentioned, my name is Forrest Revere. I am the newest member to Supervisor Friend's office and team. However, I did previously work with Public Works now CDI for roughly 6 years. And I just want to say thank you all for being in attendance and having us.
Thank you, Allison. Thank you, Forrest, for your introductions. Moving on, we do have Jennifer and Mark from the California Water Board. They're here to answer any questions that you may have regarding this process. Oh, go ahead, Jennifer. Oh, you're muted, Jennifer.
It's all good. You did the introduction. We're good.
Perfect. Alrighty, and next we have Carolyn Burke, who is also joining us. She is the Assistant Director of Public Works.
Thanks, Tiffany. Hello tonight, and thanks for the introduction. As Tiffany mentioned, my name is Carolyn Burke, and I've recently assumed the position of Assistant Public Works Director in charge of Special Services, previously held by Kent Edler, for those of you who worked with him. By way of background, I've worked as a professional engineer for the County of Santa Cruz in both the Public Works and Planning departments for the past 22 years, and I look forward to serving our constituents in this new capacity. And with that, I'll pass it back to you, Tiffany.
Thank you, Carolyn. Just so all the participants are aware, I did turn on the chat function for you so that you can communicate to us, the panelists, via chat as well. And now moving forward, we will have Beatrice Barranca, who is doing tonight's presentation.
Thank you, Tiffany, and thank you, Jennifer and Mark and everyone here in attendance. I am the Senior Civil Engineer out in Sanitation Operations. I've been with the county now for 23 years, and I've been in this position as Manager of Operations for about 7 years now. And I previously presented this material to the HOA reps back in January 17th, because I understood that this proposed rate increase was quite a bit to take on by the constituents. And so I'll move forward as to what led to this proposed 20% rate increase. So Santa Cruz County Sanitation oversees 3 sanitation districts and 5 county service areas. And we also maintain and operate the Buena Vista wastewater treatment plant. And we have right now a total of 6 wastewater treatment plants that we're overseeing. And oh, pardon me. Sorry, I didn't share the screen. Sorry about that. Okay, so the first slide was just an overall nice photo of the wastewater treatment plant. So second slide was the overall map of all of our sanitation districts. And like I mentioned before, we oversee 6 wastewater treatment plants currently, up as north to Boulder Creek, Davenport. We have water treatment plants and a recycled water plant. And then here's the small CSA number 5, Sand Dollar and Canyon del Sol, where there's 2 wastewater treatment plants. And overall, we maintain 220 miles of gravity sewer mains from 4 inches to 48 inches in diameter, 15 miles of force main from 2 inches to 36 inches. Our system includes 62 pump stations. We serve a population of over 72,000. Sanitation operation employs 49 staff. And that includes electrical instrumentation techs, sanitation maintenance workers, some engineering staff, support staff, such as we also have our treatment plant operators. And all of the staff here reports at the DA Porath facility, which is our main pumping facility for the Santa Cruz County Sanitation District. And sanitation engineering employs 9 staff. And that again is admin staff, engineers, and our total budget for our districts and our CSAs is $80 million. And I provided you this background information because we're responsible for all of the county maintained sewer district and county service areas. And just a little bit to differentiate between districts and county service areas. The county service areas go into special agreements with the county. And for example, the Sand Dollar CSA that's just below Canyon del Sol, we assist with, we help maintain some of the stairs, the beach access area. Place Demere downstream, just a ways off of Ocean View Drive. We also have security that we are in charge of, and also lighting. So each CSA is set up a little bit differently. And annually, our responsibility as a manager that oversees M&O, and I collaborate with the engineer downtown. Her responsibility is overseeing all the engineer capital improvement projects. We work together to see where we're at with our budget, with maintenance and operations, any needs for the CSAs or districts. So Canyon del Sol is has 97 townhouse units. The on-site wastewater treatment plant is a 30,000 gallon activated sludge treatment plant, and our average flows are about 6,000 gallons per day. And I wanted to note that the date of the last inspection by the State Water Board was conducted on March 23rd of 2022. And previous to that, I think that the last inspection had been in about 2011. So it'd been some time since we'd had the state inspectors on site. And there were no significant violations noted. They did identify what led to this 20% rate increase was the retaining wall that was beginning to fail. And so the retaining wall failure began around 2020. And at that time, Anderson and Company was the management company. Now it's King Management. But they contracted Harold Kasunich and Associates, a soils engineer, and they prepared a report that's dated September 25th, 2020. And I apologize that I'm not aware of the exact dates of when this failure occurred. At that time, we had a chief treatment plant operator that has since retired. But we do have dates where we go back and we realize there's something that alerted us to this failure, and that we have staff there that's on site. But that report identified the fill that was placed behind the retaining wall. That fill was placed there in 1988 as part of an expansion. And it was used to increase the capacity of each leach pit. So we were able to increase the rise length of the height of each of those leach pits. And the recommendation was to replace the retaining wall or repair it with a steel beam and wood lagging retaining wall. So there was between 2020 and 2023 in September, there was several correspondence that took place between HOA reps, King Management. The assistant director at that time was alerted to this failure. We noted that the state had identified it in their report from March. And the county, as you know, had gone through catastrophic events with all of the winter storms in December of 2022 and January. And we wanted to prevent a complete failure of this retaining wall. And so we provided ample time to the HOA to go ahead and make these repairs, because there were design plans that were prepared, and we were in communication, and there was no action taken. And I know that we'll be able to share the correspondence on the FAQs. And so we gave the HOA time to begin the repairs, and that deadline we gave them was August, and that would provide us, if August, September, and October, about 3 months before we hit the wet weather. And seeing that no action was taken, we alerted the management company and the HOA that we would move in and begin work. And so part of the work, I show these photos here where we relocate the office shed, and that's took place in September. And initially the contractor had given us a proposal to demolish and rebuild that shed, and it was about a $25,000 line item. And we hired a crane service provider to relocate this temporarily and place it back in place after the construction was completed of the retaining wall. But we had to, this retaining wall kept inching towards the office shed, and essentially our staff was unable to use this, and we decided to vacate the little office shed around April of 2023. And you can see in these photos that the 4x4 pressure treated post have failed. The lagging had really reached its end of its useful life. It was over 30 plus years. And so we moved forward, like I said, with the construction of this retaining wall. The repairs started in November with the steel beams, and our experience has been with, even during the pandemic and post-pandemic, is that we have long lead times with equipment and materials. And it took from the time that the contractor was given the go-ahead to proceed with the project. The beams were not available until mid-November, so we were really pressed for time. We were afraid that we would start having a rainy season, and so they proceeded with the work in November, and then the retaining wall and all of the drainage system was completed December 12th, 2023. And we're fortunate, right? I mean, this is a clear sunny day, that we did have some rains, but not heavy rain as we had experienced in December of 2022. The shed was relocated, and there was new fencing that was installed. And again, I mean, this project was performed by the county just to avert a catastrophic event. You can see how close the shed is to the treatment plant, and had that retaining wall failed, I think we would have been constructing this project on an even more of an emergency timeline, where, like I've mentioned, we've gone through catastrophic events with the loss of the Boulder Creek wastewater treatment plant during the CZU fire, and then where we have major flooding where we're hauling because we want to maintain service to the residents. And so the total costs of the retaining wall were $158,450. That's including Jordan's construction, the West Coast cranes was $3,200. The soils engineer was $17,216. And then there was some construction oversight and inspection for $18,000. So to give you background information, the Canyon del Sol's sewer rates have been increased only by CPI over the last 5 years. And I show the rate increase of CPI. It varies each year. It's from 2% to 4.9%. And I show the rates and the total service revenues for that year, for each of those fiscal years. The highlighted portion shows the proposed 20% rate increase. And that's the results in the $2,069.37 for each home. And then for the following year, I show no rate increase, and this all can change. I mean, I'm being very, I feel like positive, trying to remain positive that we don't know of any capital planned projects that we have or any emergencies. But since I presented this information to the HOA back in January, and I'll share that now with the insurance, our assets are insured, and our deductible from last year, as a result, I think maybe from last year's events, has increased to $35,000, whereas before our deductible was $5,000. And I share this because Sand Dollar had damages to their stairs, and the county was able to come in and make those repairs. They covered $5,000 was all that the Sand Dollar HOA was responsible for, and FEMA came in and covered 75% of those costs of the $5,000, and the cost to make those repairs was about $59,000. So for Canyon del Sol, this proposed rate increase is about $28.74 per month, and that really, it's like less than $1 a day of an increase. And so the proposed budget that was presented, we show, and I'll go through this, we show a beginning balance. That's what was in the reserves for Canyon del Sol at $127,945. All the revenue coming in for 23-24 is $165,601.27. And my responsibility is to break down those break down the expenditures and make sure that there's enough revenue to cover those expenses. We show chemical costs that's required to keep the bugs happy in the treatment plant. We show some money for electrical maintenance and operations for failed, any maintenance for generators, electrical components. We show a little bit of money for replacement of pumps. And then there's maintenance and operations for the sewer, and that's where our treatment plant operators charge all of their hours. Lab analysis costs. There's utilities, water, PG&E. And then there's another line item for pumps and motors, and that also covers those. That's more components of the pumps. If we can rebuild a pump, then we'll use that project number. Sludge processing. So sometimes we have to waste, what we say is remove the solids from the treatment plant, and that's processing. We use our sanitation maintenance workers and our vac trucks to go out and remove those solids, and they'll dispose of them at the nearest manhole that's that gravities into our main plant. So our main pump station, which is at DA4F. And then there's some maintenance for leach field, cathodic protection. Engineering's very minimal, it's $1,500. Permits, so that's state issued, the state permits, and then we also have to have some permits through environmental health for household hazardous waste. So if there's any chemicals that we store there, we need to have a hazardous plan. And then there's a little bit of money set aside for the Prop 218 flyer and sending notices out. And then this accounting and audit fees is for some overhead. But that totals our expenditure subtotal $163,300. And so that was the adopted budget. And then, like I mentioned before, I have to do this with all CSAs, all the districts, and we all have to project out our costs where we're going to be landing. If we're going to have a shortfall in budget, we will make that difference up with the proposed rate increases. And so with that retaining wall repair that we didn't anticipate repairing ourselves, we landed with a negative $27,000 $702.45 ending balance. And so we have to make up that difference. And so that's where this proposed rate increase with the revenue charge is $198,721.53. And if this passes, we'll have a positive ending balance of $19.07. And I show the same revenue for the following fiscal year. And we have identified one small project that we would like to improve on, and that's the blower roof. There's a small shed there that contains the blowers, and that needs replacement. And I have a cost of about $2,500 in 2 years from now. So if we can do it for less money, we will try and do that because we want to protect the equipment. And that shows a positive balance of $22,540 in fiscal year 25-26. But again, you know, we present this information to the homeowners, and if you approve of it, we'll move forward with it. And based, you know, on the new information that we have from our insurance, that now the deductible has increased to $35,000. Moving forward, I would encourage the HOA to have that much money in reserves, at least at minimum of $35,000. So we could always increase, you know, in 25-26, but that's for future discussion. We were asked to provide our 16 years of expenditure history. And so given the tight deadline, I came up with the 5 years, and we're working on providing the 16 years of data. And we're going to present that on the FAQ site by next Wednesday. But you can see in fiscal year 19-20, that was like the year of the pandemic. And so there's only total expenditures about $122,613. It really varies moving after the pandemic. And I can say that there's variability is in the cost of doing extra lab analysis. Sometimes we've responded to upsets in our treatment plant because there's hazardous chemicals that have been introduced and our microorganisms are dying. And so our treatment plant operator will alert our environmental programs coordinator and our pre-treatment specialist to go out and investigate. And we've had to go out and do further testing, and also we send out mailers alerting the homeowners that there's upsets, so to eliminate the use of paint thinners or paint, and don't put those down the drain, down your sewer, because it upsets our treatment plant. So for this fiscal year, I put an asterisk here because I'm taking the cost, and this the latest information was just printed on April 14th. And that's only cost up through like 78% of the fiscal year. So that our total expenditures again is because we have, you know, seem so high because we've got this, the cost of the retaining wall included in there. And so what is the timeline for this proposed rate increase? I mentioned again, we had this meeting back in January with the HOA because we had to present this engineer's report. I'm required, if I'm presenting a rate increase that's over CPI, to prepare an engineer's report and show the proposed budget, show the expenditures, and then take that to the board. And so that was presented March 12th. We have this 8-week deadline before the scheduled board meeting date to draft everything. And so I had to have everything done 8 weeks prior to this March 12th date. So The board meeting was to set the public hearing, which will take place April 30th. And we are required by state, by following all the Prop 218 guidelines, to send out a notice to each homeowner. And we send out the notices to all the addresses that we have on file. We get that information from the tax assessors. So we send it out to the owner occupied owner, the absent owner, and also the resident. So 3 different addresses that mailer, the notice is sent out to. So now we're here, where it's April 16th, and the public hearing will be on April 30th. And the flyer, the notice that we mailed out identifies the process where folks can provide a written protest. And the next meeting will be also on June 4th to adopt the resolution and then present the sewer service charge reports that identifies what the proposed sewer rate will be for each assessor parcel number with the address. And we do this for each CSA, each district. And I know that the question has been asked why this doesn't go to vote and it's only written protest. And so we follow the guidelines, the state constitution for Prop 218. And because this is a sewer service charge, the board can make that recommendation with staff's recommendations, presenting that engineer's report. And we can move forward with a proposed rate increase. And then we hear out the homeowners. And so this is your opportunity to ask questions. And I just would like to add, I think this is almost very close, that, you know, I'm always available for questions. Carolyn Burke is our new Assistant Public Works Director, but Isaac Bohorkas, who unfortunately could not be part of the meeting today, but he's our Chief Treatment Plant Operator. Some folks have asked if they could tour the treatment plant and see firsthand how we operate it. We're always available. I want to say that I feel like I'm completely transparent. This is all public information. And yeah, I don't know if there's anything else that folks would like to add.
Thank you, Bea, for that very informational presentation. It looks like we do have several hand raises and also a couple questions in our Q&A and one in our chat. I do want to begin by asking the questions out loud that came in first. So it looks like Marilyn has her hand up first. Marilyn, you should have the ability now to speak. And you can unmute yourself.
Tiffany, while Marilyn figures that out, maybe we want to read out one of the questions.
Sure. Hold on. I think I might be having some technical difficulties asking Marilyn to unmute. It looks like it's not allowing her or allowing me. Marilyn, are you able to unmute yourself?
Here, but my husband is the one who wants to ask the questions. I'm sorry, my name is the one that's on there, but Joe is the one that has the question.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, Joe.
Yeah, the question I had was, who owns the land underneath the plant?
So just to reiterate Joe's question, who owns the land under the plant? Does anybody want to answer that question?
Hi, Joe. This is Carolyn Burke, Assistant Public Works Director. And the assessor's records show that the County of Santa Cruz owns the land that the sewer treatment plant is on.
If that's the case, why didn't you repair the wall back in 2020?
Excuse me, could you repeat that? I didn't quite hear.
I was wondering why you people didn't repair the wall in 2010 instead of waiting 3 years.
I'll refer that to Beatrice, who has the timeline, and there was some discussions at that time. So I'll let her detail that.
So I think the question is why we didn't repair the retaining wall? Is that
Yes.
correct? Okay. So we went back and forth with the HOA. The retaining wall was built as part of the expansion back in 1988 to increase the capacity of those leach pits. So the retaining wall is part of that treatment plant and serves that HOA. And we really tried to walk and make ourselves available and put the HOA in contact, and also the management company at that time with the planning department to expedite repairs. And so it didn't move forward. And so again, because of those catastrophic events that we've experienced back in December 2022 and January, we felt like we didn't want to have a complete failure.
But you ended up repairing it anyway, so why wasn't it just done earlier?
So Joe, that would be our preference, would be to do it as soon as possible. And we'll be posting on our FAQ page one of our correspondences that kind of provides a summary timeline of our different contacts with the HOA. But as Beatrice noted in her presentation, it was originally brought up early on in 2020, and the HOA indicated that they wanted to, that they were capable and wanted to pursue doing that themselves instead of having the CSA do it and having the county oversee that process. So that's where Beatrice went into, you know, where we got to an emergency situation, and we had to tell the HOA, you know, if we can't get this done by August 4th, we need to do this on an emergency basis to avert a potential disaster, you know, where we don't have any treatment plant that's functional to treat the waste. And then we would be hauling off the waste. And from our recent experiences, Beatrice mentioned the CZU disaster, and we had to haul from one of these treatment plants. And for the size of your treatment plant, it could be as much as $1,000 a day, because you're treating 6,000 gallons a day. So, you know, it was just imperative that we get it done. But like Beatrice mentioned, we like to work with the HOAs that are part of our CSA program. But we just, the HOA was unable to do it in that amount of time, so we had to step in.
Thank you, Bea. Thank you, Carolyn. And thank you, Joe, for asking your questions. We're going to move on to Karen. You should now have the ability to unmute and ask your question.
I have two questions.
Sure.
One is, what is Catholic protection? I mean, it's a minor cost, but I have no idea what that means.
I can answer that. So cathodic protection, we need to test metal that to make sure that it's not corroded.
Okay,
So we do that annually, and that's part of all of our treatment plants and force mains. So it's an annual inspection. So whenever there's we need to stabilize the anodes, and there's more to it, then we have to ground them, and then it just protects the metal from corrosion.
okay. And my second question is, all the county owns the land where the treatment plant is located. But does HOA own the facilities on that land?
So this is something that we will look into further. I think most of our CSAs have been successful for long periods of time. We don't often have a situation where we're terminating or we're looking at who owns which asset. But we, would be taking that up with our council, and we can look into that more and hopefully provide additional information on our FAQ site. It's an excellent question, Karen.
Thank you.
Alrighty, thank you, Karen, for asking your question. Moving on to the next question that we received was from Colin. How many people from the HOA? I think we may need additional context in order to answer that question. As to what you're referring to, how many people from the HOA. If you can provide additional context, that would be really helpful, and we can go ahead and answer that question. Moving on, we have two questions. The first one being biggest line item is sewer MNO. What goes into that?
So that's where our treatment plant operators charge their time to, their daily time, weekly time, and also, yeah, that's the biggest chunk of if our sanitation maintenance workers have to go out and do other work besides hauling. For example, I was also talking about our pre-treatment staff that has provided some support to the HOA. They'll charge that project. And the other thing, just real quickly, I'll add is that I mentioned we oversee all of these districts and we have a budget of $80 million. And as somebody that, that oversees this, I have to be responsible and make sure that funds are not mingled and that we charge the correct project. And if equipment is purchased for the Canyon Del Sol, that we charge Canyon Del Sol for that. So I just wanted to add that.
Great, thank you. Moving on to the next question is, are you saying we do or don't vote on your proposal?
So this proposal is subject to a protest vote. So that's a protest ballot. And I can provide in the chat what B had summarized earlier about Article 13D of the California Constitution, which outlines the protest vote procedure. So that occurs at the April 30th hearing, and that's a public hearing, which is also required by 218. And so that's where we will share the results and how many protest ballots we have received. And residents are also able to provide public testimony at that meeting. And so, yeah, and that's a real push to get you as much information as possible prior to that so that you can make an informed decision.
Wonderful, thank you. Just following up on Colin, people on this, and if you're referring to how many people in this meeting are from the HOA, none of us are from the HOA. We have people, panelists here from the Water Board, from the County of Santa Cruz, including Supervisor Zach Friend's office. Okay, Marilyn and Joe, I see your hand up. You should now have the ability to unmute to ask your question.
We already asked the question. Thank you.
Okay, then I will go ahead and lower your hand. I just saw that your hand was raised again. Okay. Moving on, I see Karen, your hand is raised. You shall now have the ability to unmute to ask your question.
Okay, so my other question is, what happens if enough residents protest the rate increase? So there is no rate increase. What will happen?
So, Karen, if the proposed rate increase is not passed, then the CSA, we will no longer be able to provide services. The county will not be able to provide services for the county service area, because it is for the benefit of just that one area. So the county cannot use funds that are meant for the entire sanitation district. Each district is responsible for their own rates. As Beatrice mentioned, we look at the operating costs for just that district and we set those rates accordingly. So we can't have ratepayers from another district paying for CSA 5 Canyon del Sol. So we would not be able to provide that, and that would go into effect in the new fiscal year. So that would be July 1st. So I can also pass this to Mark from the State Water Board, who could provide you a little bit more information about what the HOA would need to do to take care of their own system and provide a similar service to what the county provides now. Mark, would you mind handling that, or Jennifer? I'm not sure if she's sitting next to you.
Yeah, we're actually, we're sitting right next to each other.
Okay.
So thanks, Carolyn, for that. And maybe what I'll do, if you guys don't mind, is provide just a little context of who the heck we are and what is it that we do. You know, I found a lot of times when we talk to people, they don't necessarily know what our role is. So we're sometimes called the Central Coast Water Board, sometimes called the State Water Board. We're essentially the state regulators that regulate wastewater treatment plants. Our particular office, we cover about the Santa Cruz to Santa Barbara area in California, and we regulate about 230 facilities like yours. So we see the good, the bad, the ugly of things that go well. And essentially, what our role is in your wastewater treatment plant is that the law requires the plant to have a permit from us in order to discharge waste. And so currently the county has that permit, and that permit requires several things. Kind of the high level things that it requires is for you to have the appropriate grade 3 operator to run your plant. It requires regular report submittals with monitoring data, basically testing for compliance with your permit conditions, and basically demonstrating that you have the technical, managerial, and financial ability to run the plant and have this discharge of waste. So that's the big picture context of kind of what we do. Getting back to the question of what would happen if the county didn't do this and the HOA was looking to have somebody else do it. Really, if that's the case, that is something that you're going to need to plan ahead for. You know, the process of applying for a permit from us and, you know, demonstrating that you have that technical, managerial, and financial ability to do it. You know, that application process takes us some time to review, and really big picture, you know, you can't discharge without a permit. And so it's going to be really important that you stay in compliance with state law and having an appropriate permit that you're in compliance with. You know, I never like to scare people too much, but, you know, the penalties for not complying with the permit are fairly large. You know, so even minor things. So currently the county is, you know, as B mentioned, they're in compliance with the permit. They're doing a good job, but we have a lot of facilities that aren't, and the liability that's associated with each violation ranges between $1,000 and $5,000 a day. And so, for example, you know, we have a facility that didn't turn in their monitoring report. They're, you know, 30 days late on that. They were out of compliance for a couple of constituents because their wastewater plant wasn't working appropriately. just those three little items over the course of a month is $90,000 worth of liability. And so certainly making sure that you have a permit, continuing to comply with it are really important things on how to keep your costs down. You know, you guys are seeing this spike because of this particular project. We see this with facilities all over where they didn't have appropriate maintenance. They didn't, plan for those catastrophes. And then they're faced with these ginormous bills and these really big rate increases. And so these are all really important things to keep in mind going forward. Did that answer the question, Carolyn?
Yeah, yes, I think so. Yeah, thank you for that. I appreciate you being here.
Yeah, and maybe just stepping back a little bit, if the HOA and the residents were looking at a different option and you guys wanted to try to find someone else to do this for you, we're certainly willing to chat about that. We're willing to, we're happy to share our experience of what has worked well and hasn't worked well, and, try to set, you up for success. It is very difficult to run a wastewater plant. There's not a lot of folks that you're often willing to take that on, and typically entities like counties do a good job with that. Historically, if we look at all our facilities, big, large entities that have, those skills and the experience tend to keep the facilities out of trouble and in compliance. And that really does help keep costs down over a long period of time.
Great, thank you.
You want to add, Mark, about this particular facility?
No,
Let me.
sorry about that.
I think I'm muted now. Maybe Tiffany.
Oh, sorry, I was trying to mute you, Mark, but there you go. Thank you both. So I just wanted to do a time check. It's 6:52. We have 8 minutes left, and we will do our best to answer everybody's questions. I do see several hands raised and also one question in the Q&A. Colin, I do see your hand is raised. You now have the ability to unmute to ask your question.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
I didn't realize my question about the HOA people was so difficult. It's how many HOA people are in this meeting?
Well, Carolyn, go ahead.
Oh yeah, sorry, Colin. I answered it in the chat. So it shows that there are 7 panelists, that's us speaking, and then there are 11 attendees. So assuming that all the attendees are HOA folks, then it would be 11.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
Thank you. Now next we have Robert. I do see that you had a question in the chat. You should now be able to unmute yourself to ask your question.
Yeah, hi, this is Bob Carpenter. Yeah, I guess first question is, I put this one in the chat. There's a $15K maintenance and operations budget overrun for the 2023-2024 period. Can we get some form of an explanation of that overrun? That's my first question.
I can answer that. I'll have to look into the details of that. I'm just assuming that the project was completed during November and December, and we did have to empty out the operator shed, and there's a little bit of more involvement from the treatment plant operators while that construction project was going on. But I can certainly ask the treatment plant operator those questions.
Okay, thank you. Second question is the county and I guess ultimately the Board of Supervisors open to a proposal from Canon del Sol of how we would like to interpret this situation in terms of budget, i.e. taking into consideration your proposed budget, but furthermore, the management of the quote, back payment of the $27,000, and then moving forward, how any money that is collected in excess is handled by the county. Because, you know, while I understand you guys are fairly transparent at the end of the year of reserves being held and stuff, we don't believe that since your budgets don't really contain a quote reserve line item where a reserve fund is built, it's kind of gray to us how that reserve fund continues to grow other than just over collection.
So, Robert, that's an interesting question, and I guess I'd want to clarify kind of what you're saying here. I mean, typically, the county can't operate in arrears on CSAs. It's why we have every year an engineer's report that is certified by a civil engineer and prepared and certified by a civil engineer, so that we know that these costs are based on real estimates and the real ability to provide service. So things that, you know, some creative ideas about, you know, the HOA doing portions of this, that didn't work out. So we have to be able to really prepare a budget and estimate that's based on, you know, the commitments that the county can make. As far as reserves, you're correct. The reserves are what we don't spend in a given year does go into a reserve fund. So I guess the clarification that I would ask for is, what specifically would you be asking on how the reserves grow, aside from that it's the unspent balance, like how we would reallocate those reserves? Is that what you're getting at?
No, thank you for trying. I mean, I understand my question was wasn't exactly clear. As an example, if the HOA were to pay off the 27,702.45, would the county be willing to put together a CPI based budget for 2024/2025? Like budget that's 175 versus 198.
So Beatrice, have you seen something like that in the past?
I haven't, but we can certainly ask county council to weigh in on that question. Because
Yeah,
it would have to be presented to the Board of Supervisors.
Yeah, so the problem is with the budget that's been presented basically has this ongoing 20%. And I understand that number will effectively get lower through future CPI increases. But to the HOA, it appears as this one-time 20% that is kind of in continuum. We could get to a zero CPI situation for a long period of time again. And, you know, basically we will be greatly over, you know, you guys will be collecting over 25K a year moving forward of our owners' money.
Right.
You know, as an HOA, we're obligated to have a reserve fund, so it's nothing uncommon for us to do.
Mm-hmm.
And we certainly could work into our structured state regulated program a reserve fund that we manage ourselves for CSA 5 that we could collectively work to pre-budget every period utilization of, but collectively then let the HOA manage it and collect it. Because it's kind of a surprise to some owners that all of a sudden there's 130K that the county's been sitting on that they haven't been receiving any value for or anything like that. And this looks like you're just going to try to build that again.
I see Allison has her hand up. Would you like to speak?
Yeah, hi, Bob. So I can only speak historically onto what things the board has done in instances when there has been an unexpected expense that has arisen and CSAs have needed to do things like emergency repairs, which is essentially what your CSA in some ways has come across.
Mm-hmm.
And they have in the past done what we've seen is kind of what we consider one-time increases in order to address that expense. And the issue I see here is that that's sort of in some ways what the Department of Public Works and B is presenting here, which is I'm not sure how you would address your deficit at present, which is the $27,000 in order to get you to solvency for your 24-25 fiscal year without approving essentially the increase for the 24-25 fiscal year, because you need to address the deficit in order to get to I mean, this basically gets you to a $20 less than balance. So you would need to essentially approve this year's increase and then contemplate moving forward, to your point, potentially reducing it back down. We've seen that in the past, but in order to get to even what you're considering, this increase would need to pass first, because you have to address, as Carolyn was saying, the county and CSAs don't operate in arrears fiscally. And so I can only speak to what we've seen in other instances, which is we have seen CSAs do one-time increase to address emergency repairs and then have the opportunity to lower them back down to address general operating procedures. But again, where your CSA is at right now, you need to pass this increase in order to even address the emergency repair in the first place, in order to have the conversations that you were talking about. I'm not sure how you guys would gather the $27,000 to address your emergency repair without dealing with this procedure. I do see we're also at time, but I can only speak again to what we've seen historically in terms of, yes, we've seen increases and then moving it back down to address operations and maintenance after an emergency repair has been done. We have seen that in the past, but your CSA has to first gather the funds to deal with the emergency, which is where you're at.
Well, thank you, Allison, for providing that detailed response. So it looks like we are at time. I want everyone attending this meeting to take the time to, screenshot, or, you have B's information, Carolyn's information, you also have Isaac's information. So if you have any additional questions, we're here to answer any questions that you have, but also I did include our website in the chat. That web page is actually going to have more information, including FAQs and more information about this. I will also send an email out to everybody that I invited to in this meeting with information about the meeting recording, about any updates to our web page that you may want to access for more information, including the FAQs. I do want to take the time to thank all of our panelists here that joined us for this presentation, but also for all the attendees and all of your questions that you asked. We will be in touch, and I hope you all have a good evening.